Hello and welcome to our Saturday Live. Thank you for joining us. I am your host Tarun Chitratan, and today we have another interesting session brought to you by PRPOI. So, media has been in a state of flux for the last couple of months now. However, when chaos reigns, it gives birth to innovation. And today we will discuss media innovation and help our PR community members learn more about it. And there is a lot of innovation happening in the media industry right now. Our fabulous panel of independent media experts today will share the individual innovations and discuss with us best practices along with insights on how PR professionals and journalists can work more cohesively in the current changing scenario. Before we begin, we would also like to thank the fabulous team at AdGully for coming on board as our media partners to support the learning initiative and discussions at PRPOI. So let's meet our panelists. First, we have Ruth D'Souza. Ruth is a media professional with over 19 plus years of experience. She began her career with TV and moved to journalism as a features writer. She went independent 13 years ago, so she's the senior most person that we have today with us. Her work has been published in various prestigious national and international publications on food and beverage, architecture and interiors, culture and lifestyle. She's on the jury panel for prestigious F&B awards and is also a Google certified fake news detection trainer. When you want to learn more about how to write about food, you must attend her workshop on food writing. Next, we have Dipali. Hi, Dipali.
Hi.
Dipali has over 17 years of experience as a media professional. After working with Bombay Times, ADC, Sunday Midday, DNA After Hours, where she reported on a various, gamut of topics that included health, campus, and local events. She went independent last year, and her words can now be found in publications like Mumbai Mirror, Hindu, Times, Mint Lounge, DNA, Bollywood Insider, Architectural Digest, Vogue.in, to name a few. She writes on art and culture, food, music, films, lifestyle, and beauty, and appreciates a well written media pitch. We also have with us Joanna Lobo. Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
She's an independent journalist from Goa and based in Mumbai. And she's worked with publications like Hindustan Times, DNA, Midday, before going freelance 3 years back. Her areas of interest include food and how it ties with communities in different regions, sustainable travel, adventure and culture, luxury, health, and lifestyle. She's written for a host of Indian and international magazines, digital publications, and newspapers. She is also a strong advocate of the freelance life and curates a fortnightly newsletters for writers and freelancers in India called It's All Right. That is spelled as WRITE. So all the budding independent journalists, freelance journalists can, take a look at that. She also has co-founded a food publication, But First Food, on Medium to tell original and unusual stories on food. So welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start the discussion with Ruth, right? So tell us a little bit about, the innovation that you have been doing in the media space.
Okay, when it comes to the situation right now, rather than say innovation, I'd say it was a major change of approach in how I started working on stories because a lot of things changed. Media went into a flux completely with the lockdown and stuff like this. So it was basically a change of approach, which I thought was the best way to go. Also, considering that I do have a background in working in newsrooms and I know how editors and commissioning editors think. So the primary thing was first to try and find homes for stories. And what was a basic thing is that any story that's time bound is naturally done in-house with the publication. So I'd rather not with something like that. I began to look for features that I could take a little bit more time on, but which were essential to the moment. And so I'd say the first change in approach was pitching stories that are not time bound.
Right.
Another strategy I did was to try and look at things that were happening around me, which had a certain level of similarity. So while everyone in your everyday media or everyday news cycle was looking at how people were working towards helping the food shortage that was there among migrant workers, etc., there were a lot of other people who were working towards helping a lot of lesser known communities that make up our society, whether it's the laborers, whether it's the LGBTQ, whether it's orphan children. And so I managed to find a lot of community people were doing such work and string that together for a story. And that came out in First Post. Similarly, there was a whole series of lives that came up on food and beverage and a lot of discussions that happened. And it was a lot of good information that was being collated. So the approach was to see how something new in terms of collating information regarding food and making it an online repertoire of information and resources. So that story came out in First Post. And another strategy I did was to look at stories I worked on earlier, where there was a lot of innovation and a new approach. And you can always be sure that such people will come up with something new at that point. And case an example being Mitti Cafe, which was and is still, I think, India's first place to hire people with mental, physical, and even psychological disabilities. And true enough, they were also doing something really unique. And the fact that their entire disabled community had come out and they were also doing something to help the underprivileged or those who needed help during the lockdown. And that story was picked up by Reader's Digest.
Wow.
And finally, another approach was to look at publications and categories, especially in online publications, look at categories within the publication that I normally didn't pitch to. For example, Architectural Digest, I normally used to write on interiors and architecture, but they have a design segment as well. And for that, the Mumbai Mask Project, where they have designed masks from scratch and face shields from scratch, that fit in perfectly. And so it was a timely story, but it fit in a segment that I was already working with, but in an entirely different genre in that. So I think an entire different change and different approach was what helped me during this entire time in terms of innovation. Otherwise, the fields remain the same. So yeah,
Understand.
that's how I started.
But that's a hell of a lot of creativity out there.
Yeah. It's just a
Story
matter of
on in Architectural Digest and find an angle for it. I mean, that's really creative.
yeah. It comes with, I guess, it just comes with the flow when you see what's happening around you and you see how magazines themselves change their approach to stories and the kind of stories they were taking. You kind of have to try and get into the flow very quickly. So that's how it
Right.
worked for me.
Awesome. Dipali, what about you?
Well, in my case, I'd have to say that the innovation that we are really talking about, at least in my case, was it's something that I've been doing from the beginning of my career. So, we've always heard over the years, I've heard from the industry people that the more niche you go, the more you flourish. And I mean, that is true. I mean, you become more knowledgeable about the subject, and you become an expert in it. After covering it for many years, and you start digging deeper and deeper. But I think in my case, what happens is that I diversified early on. So each publication that I was shifting to, I kept on adding those beats and those skills. So I didn't really delete anything from my repertoire. In fact, I kept adding them. So and thankfully the publications and my editors and my colleagues and all were good with it. They allowed me the freedom. And so I kept doing that. And that has stood me in a good position in these times, because when I see that at least one or two fields are not working anymore, for example theater, which is one of my primary beats, there's not much happening, although there's a little bit of digital and online stuff going on over there, but it's not really live. Theaters is still going to take time to come back. So when that sort of shut, and there's not much scope to write over there, then I have other things to fall back upon, things that are really working, like movies, or the content on OTT, or food, music, lifestyle. These are things that are still working, and thankfully I have these to fall back upon. So I think in my case, I would have to say that the innovation has been my ability to sort of have my fingers in all pies. So
Brilliant.
that would be my advice.
Thank you. Joanna?
Okay, so to repeat, actually to enforce what Ruth said earlier, it's not as much innovation as it is a changed approach, because what we're doing is nothing path breaking on you. We're just adapting to situations. So, like Dipali, also, I was my subjects are quite diverse. I don't really focus only on food or travel because I realized as much as it pays to be niche in a subject, I like writing for multiple publications. So, and there are a lot of food writers, really good food writers out there. So it's difficult to compete with them. So I just write about everything. Although, weirdly enough, for the past 3 months, I've been writing a lot of food stories because food is something that is bringing a lot of people joy in this lockdown.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, it's a privilege and everything, but these are really small things that are bringing people joy. And even if people aren't cooking, they want to read about it or they want to learn about it. So I've been writing a lot of food stories. And the difficulty with that is you obviously can't go out and report. And it's a little odd writing a food story when you can't go out and taste the food,
Correct.
which is why a lot of food stories are reported and stuff like that these days. And because I wasn't finding a home for them, that's the reason my friend and I started this Medium publication. It was basically to just do the kind of food stories that we want to do and put it out there so that people can read. And neither of us are big fans of having blogs because we have them but we don't update them, so they just lie there static. So we've just been putting it on Medium, and Medium has a wider reach because it's global. So you have people from all over the world reading your stories. So, in terms of writing food stories, obviously it's not experiential anymore. So you are relying a lot on your memories and you're relying a lot on people's nostalgia of food. So,
Yeah.
for instance, Condé Nast Traveler is doing fun stories about Parle G biscuits and all the other sweets and stuff we used to eat in the 90s because those are the things that connect with people. So I haven't written those stories, but I really enjoy reading them. So obviously, stories we've written are focused on memories and nostalgia and basically stuff that we don't really need to go out and try because we've already had it before. Beyond food stories, it oh, beyond food stories, I've been writing across. Obviously, travel has completely stopped, so not doing any travel stories. Even virtual travel stories have been done to death in the first 2 months of the lockdown. So there's no point repeating those. But I think my focus has shifted to a lot of people stories. So, what are people doing? What are the innovations they are doing? How they are dealing with this situation? How workplaces have changed? How people's lives have changed? So, yeah, so that is the only change I would say that has happened. But no innovations, it's just a change of approach. So
Awesome, awesome. So let's start taking in questions from the audience. We have a lot of questions already popping in. Ruth, I think you should start off with answering this question. How does your world work? Give us an insight.
Wow. Okay. The world of an independent.
Yeah.
Actually, it's pretty simple, but you just have to think of yourself outside of a regular, being on rolls with the media company. The thing is a little harder. You are constantly on the lookout for a range of stories. You pitch them to all the editors that you already are working with. If you're, I mean, the ones you are comfortable working with, and then of course there are newer stories which you can constantly pitch to new publications that you want to break into. Now there is an entire waiting game when it comes to connecting with editors and when they say yes to a story or if they say yes to a story. So it's a kind of waiting game that you have to get the hang of. And yeah, then you do your story, you repeat your story, you put it out there. I think the key difference between being on rolls full time and being an independent is the fact that you're writing for multiple publications at the same time. So you're also juggling a lot of different. Every publication has its own approach, so you're juggling a lot of different templates, understand the flow of a story, how it has to be approached, and things like that. So I guess the simplest way to put it is you picture yourself as a full-time employee of one publication, but as an independent full-time employee of multiple publications, and think of it that way. So your work day is essentially a couple of hours in every office across the country and the world. So I guess that would be the simplest way for me to put it.
That's like working 24/7.
Sorry?
That's like working 24/7.
Pretty much 24/7, unless you put in certain ground rules, which I did in the initial couple of years. I worked 24/7, but after that I realized that I'm just going to burn out multiple times, which I did. And so I have a certain amount of strict rules that I have, like no Saturdays, Sundays, unless I have scheduled something or unless the world is burning, I don't work on Saturdays, Sundays at all.
Interesting. So, Dipali, you are the newest entrant in the field of independent journalism, right? So, how
Yes.
are you facing the same kind of issues? How are you planning your day, to make sure that you don't burn out?
So actually, this is my second stint at independent journalism. I did that 3 years ago, and then later I joined another job. But I think the first time I wasn't very confident, and wasn't very sure how I wanted to take things, and what contacts and what publications to approach and things like that. So I think the first stint was that slightly on shaky grounds. But I think after that, again, last year when I again decided to go independent, I think it's been more of a with a slightly more assured way, because now I know who to approach. I kind of have my schedule in mind for the day, and like Ruth, I have some ground rules. I not Saturday, Sunday, but yeah, at least Sunday I try not to take on any work unless it's super important. But yeah, Sundays are my day off, and post 7 usually I don't really like to work. So more or
Interesting.
less that's way.
So you set your own ground rules on that.
I think everyone has to, because it also depends on your capacity and your and these days, especially with the with no domestic help, nothing happening, you have to schedule everything in. There are times I find myself dusting the house at post dinner. So you have to weave those things in along with your professional work.
I think the PR community can learn a lot from how you guys schedule your day, because at this point, with everybody working from home, it's almost like, with the amount of clients that we have, it's almost like having different people to report to at all hours of the day. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Joanna, there's an interesting question which I think you should answer, since you're a strong advocate of independent journalism. Is it a community to support independent journalists?
Yeah, quite a few. So you have the unofficial ones, you have Facebook groups and all where you can join and meet like-minded writers. But then you also have organizations like NWNI, whose full form completely skipped my mind right now, but check it out. It's only for women journalists, of course.
Right.
Then there is the South Asian Journalist Association, SAJA. So there are quite a few. You just have to look them up online. And I don't know if it deals specifically with independent journalists, but it's just journalists as a whole. And they offer a lot of support and help to journalists who are struggling basically at this point in their career. So, yeah, you
So
just
is
have
it
to
necessary?
do a search on Facebook. Honestly, there will be dozens. You just have to pick and choose.
So is it necessary for every independent journalist also to be a member of the Press Club of India, or is that a choice?
That's a
No,
choice.
that's a choice. Yeah.
Take independent journalists, actually. Do they? Because I think you need a signed document from your organization that you're working
Yeah,
with.
you do need a lot of paperwork from your from an organization. So but there are ways in which you can get in, but I think it's still
Yeah.
a bit convoluted right now.
I think you need a couple of articles, published articles, that you need to present to them, and get probably 2 or 3 members of
Yeah, yeah.
existing members of press club to sign for you and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
Okay.
those kind.
So for an independent journalist, which is the organization that you would recommend as support? What would be your recommendation?
I didn't get your question, sorry.
If somebody wants to, somebody who's starting out as an independent journalist, what is that one organization that you would recommend that will help or support them?
I think NWMI helps, but it's like I said, only for women journalists, so it's restricted in that sense.
So
There are a few I can't think of any right now.
okay, we'll come back to that. Ruth, this question is for you. Are you considering having your own platform as opposed to writing for other platforms?
Okay, I had 3 blogs over a period of the last 15 years or so, all of which are defunct right now. None of them are, I haven't written in my food blog for 3 years or 2 years right now. So it is fun to have your own platform. For me, when I first started using blogs and stuff like that, it was primarily to learn and to help the career aspect of it. So I think it's helpful. Will I start doing something like that on my own again? Maybe I do that when I'm assured that it will contribute to my financial bottom line. Otherwise, till then, I think I'll just continue with pitching and writing to publications and stuff like that.
Okay, so the next question is for Dipali. What has your experience been with the PR industry?
I would have to say it's mostly been really good. I really cannot recall any, really bad incident, or of course there might have been one or two, couple of stray incidents where you do get a little, things get lost in translation, and there are misunderstandings. Those are not really that important. But yeah, I would
Correct.
have to say it's mostly been good. And in fact, a lot of PRs over the years have now become friends. And the good thing I think is that I don't like doing favors to PRs, even if they are my friends. And if I think that a story pitch is not working for me or will not work for a publication, I don't have an issue saying no to them, and I think most of them understand that now. So I would have to say that they've been really helpful, and yeah, it's been very good.
So that's nice to hear, and it's perfectly fine to say no. And in fact, a lot of PR professionals appreciate that when you are upfront and you tell them yes or a no. It's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Right.
The next question is for you. Since you contribute to multiple publication, how does it work? Does a publication assign you, or do you pitch a story to a publication?
Who was that directed at,
Yeah.
Tarunji?
Joanna.
Joanna.
Oh,
Joanna.
me. How do I?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you have to pitch. So it works in two ways. You can either pitch a publication, or if you have a good relationship with an editor, they will get in touch with you and commission a story. But most of the time, I'm pitching a story to different publications. If I have an idea, I just try to find a publication that it will work for and pitch them.
Awesome. Awesome. Ruth, next question is for you. Why did you decide to become an independent journalist, and how did you go about setting the goal and making that transition? I'm sure, like 13 years ago, it must have been a tough call to, decide
Yeah.
to go independent.
So for me, it was the situation at that time. My daughter was barely 1.5 years old, and I had a lot of problem with having babysitting help. And so I just decided one day, let's just give this independent journalism thing a shot. It didn't really work out for me in the beginning, and honestly, I didn't have a game plan. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is the goal I'm going to achieve. And at that point, journalism did not really work out for me. I had to get into content development and content writing to actually earn a living at that point. Journalism as an independent, I could say, probably took off for me around 8 years or so ago, when the industry started opening up a little bit more to journalists like me who were independent, and it made more sense or whatever for them. So uh, my goals keep changing all the time. So I have a set number of publications that I want to try and pitch and crack for a given year, Indian and international. So the goal is always to do that. And I'm very quick. As soon as I manage to achieve that goal, I'm very quick to get over that and start the next round. I like challenging myself all the time. So that's basically what I did with being an independent journalist. And I balance it out with journalism and content development as well. So yeah.
So it's like you're running your own business as such, right? A lot of self
Absolutely.
motivation is required for you to sustain yourself, or move forward in independent journalism, right?
Absolutely. I look at it, and one of my favorite ways to explain it is like you're like a one-man show where you're your own marketing manager, you're your finance director, you are your CA, you're also your muscle man when you have to, collect payments from different clients or publications or stuff like that. So it's an all-in-one kind of situation.
Awesome. So the next question is for all three of you. Feel free to pick this up. Which has been your best story till date, and why you like that one? Why did you like that story?
Okay.
Oh, that's a tough one to pick.
That's a very tough one.
So the first one that comes to mind.
I have a best story for the year so far. It is a food story. It's basically I did this for Verve magazine, and I had visited the Blue Synagogue in South Bombay, and I spent 2 days in the kitchen. So they have a kitchen below where they feed, obviously, the faithful.
Okay.
And Moshe, who everybody knows, Moshe Sheikh, he was planning on opening it out to the public. So he wanted to have an experience where people come, check out the synagogue, visit the prayer room and everything, and it ends with the meal downstairs. And they had recently renovated it also.
Right.
So I spent time in their kitchen, watched the way they cook and all. So my story was about Jewish food in Bombay and the way it's changed and all of that. And also, speaking about the synagogue, speaking about the chef. I mean, besides Moshe, there's another woman who cooks there. So I really liked the story because it was very personal. It was the kind of narrative I like. My editor liked the story. She paid me really, really high compliments for it. So that's for me. That's like one of my best stories for the year. Best story ever. I can't think of. It's a long list. Not quite.
Interesting. With all this entire thing of journalism, independent journalism, how do you guys go about financial planning? Is it tough in terms of getting remuneration, or like Ruth mentioned, you are your own muscle man as well, and we know as PR agencies also, we have the same kind of issues with brands or companies that we work with. How is it on your end? How do you actually start planning your finance when you are in this field?
So for me personally, I think I learned it the hard way because I started quite some time back. So I burnt my fingers with quite a few clients. So I set certain ground rules for myself that if someone has defaulted on a payment, I don't go and work with them again, no matter how good the money is. And considering that every publication and every client has got a different payment cycle, which varies from
Right.
30 days to 90 days to 6 months to if the like something like the current situation is I have payments that are pending from December of last year as well. So I have tried to build my portfolio in such a way that I get payments twice a month, one
Right.
that comes in at the end of 1 month, the first week of the other, and another that comes in say between the 15th and the 20th. And I've tried to build that balance between the two. So that also pushes me to pitch stories in a particular way and in a particular time frame and get things rolling constantly for myself. But again, I keep saying that I always balance out the financial aspect with content development as well as journalism, and not concentrating on just one of them. I keep all my options open.
So you have to have multiple gigs running at the same point of time.
Yes, and a couple on back burner as well.
Awesome. So has this current pandemic made it easier for you to get more gigs? Because I think people are more acceptable towards, accepting towards getting stories from people who are working from home.
I okay. I mean, if
No, go
anyone's
for it. Deepali, go
okay,
for it.
I was I would think it's a very yes and no kind of a situation because your the obvious choices that you could have written or were writing and things like that, those are obviously not really there. So in that aspect, it might have become a little slightly more challenging. But I think what's become interesting in these times is that how your perspective has changed. Something that I would not have thought of at all 4 months ago.
Right.
I can see it with that perspective and with that much, because I have that time in hand, I can give it that much more thought, write it better. So I can pitch stories better, that's a very important aspect to get anything across to the editorial teams. So I think in those aspects, when you're looking at things differently, when your perspective is slightly changed, when you're pitching them better, and you're getting the time to write them better, then I think in those aspects, this time has been sort of an advantage.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Joanna, would you like to add to that?
Whether it's easier right now, it's like she said, it's a yes and no thing because a lot of publications that we used to write for have just shut down.
Yeah.
So,
That's all.
and we don't know
Yeah.
if they are coming back. So they've shut down. A lot of them have kept our payments with them. So there's that aspect of it. Also, a lot more people have lost their jobs. So the freelance market has expanded beyond what we thought it would. So you're basically fighting with a lot of people for, getting one story in one publication. So it's difficult. It's become a little more difficult. I haven't changed in the sense that I still keep pitching the same number of pitches, but the response rate is much lower. The rejection rate is much higher because obviously everyone's editors are getting bombarded with pitches. So you have to be a little more selective in how you write for them. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm getting a lot of questions on media pitches. So I'm going to paraphrase that a little bit. So is it so? In today it's not possible for us to meet over a cup of coffee and understand the the kind of publications that you're writing for, or the kind of stories that you're working on. So is it fine if a PR professional, while making a pitch, requests or asks you which publication would you kind of see this as a best fit? Or let's say while making a pitch also recommend based on your earlier stories that I think this would make a great story for XYZ publication.
Adhika?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I do not like it when people message me and say this would be a good fit for XYZ publication because you are not going to be telling me where I'm, pitching this story. If I think it's a good fit, I will write it. That basically makes it seem like you are telling me what to do, and I don't like that. So I wouldn't recommend. I don't know what these ladies think, but I wouldn't recommend saying, "I think this is a good fit for that publication." You could just send it and say, "I think this is a good idea. Would you have a look at it?" or something like that. Because another thing that is seriously annoying. Sorry about that, but I get calls from people asking me, "What are you working on?" I'm working on.
Yes.
To tell you, right? So you can phrase it differently. You can just say that I have this client or whatever. See if this person fits into any of the stories that you're working on currently. You can't ask me what I'm working on because nobody asks me that. Even when I was part of an organization, only my boss would ask me what I was working on. Nobody else would. So please don't ask people what they're working on. And a good way to find out the publications they write for is really just a Google search. There is this website called Muckrack. You type in the journalist name and Muckrack, it gives you the recent articles. And I'm saying this because when we had the test call the other day, I kid you not, on that day I had 2 calls from people asking me, would you mind writing this story in DNA? I worked in DNA. I quit DNA in 2014. The paper doesn't exist anymore. It's gone completely digital, and people are asking me to write a story for DNA. So you could have just done Google search, and you do Google search for my DNA doesn't feature because I wrote for DNA 6 years back.
Quite some time. Like that's surprising because this question about what are you working on, a call just to find out, has been a very standard practice, I think, for the last 20 years that I've been in the industry.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Practice should die.
Yeah,
It should just vanish. It's the most annoying thing, like Joanna said, to get that one message from the PR saying, "Hi, what are you working on?" I am not going to tell you the 5 stories that I'm working on at the moment so that you can fit your one client in it. You need to tell me who your clients are. You need to tell me what all is there. Have any story to pitch, and let me decide if that fits anywhere or will fit in the future. So, that what are you working on is.
I have another version of that. I normally, if I put up a story that I have just done the story, I get at least 3 to 4 mails saying, "Hi, we read the story of yours, and we have a client who can fit into the story." And it completely fails me what I'm supposed to do with that mail. So
Part 2 of the story.
Part 2 of the story. So I really am never sure what to do with such mails, and it just doesn't bode well for the person who's writing in because the next time they do, I'm really not going to take them seriously. And I mean that's.
No, that's completely understandable. But it often happens, let's say, a PR person sends in a pitch and let's say to an independent journalist, and let's say you take a look at it and, you say that I'll kind of try and see what we can do. It's an interesting profile. Let me see what I would like to do with it. And let's say there is an interview also that happens, but a journalist is, very hesitant about letting the PR person know which publication he or she is pitching it to. And that leaves them in a very uncomfortable position because they are also answerable to their clients for the time, energy, and effort that is put in. Why does that happen?
Honestly, because so what I normally do is if I find something interesting and if I am pitching, I do try and keep the PR person in the loop and say, okay, these are the possible publications. But where this has come and bit me again is PR people coming back and saying, oh, you published it in this, but you said you're pitching it to that, so why didn't it come in that? And
Right.
so that is one of the reasons possibly why someone would hesitate in telling them which publication. And also, you have to understand that at the end of the day, even once you do the story, there is a chance the publication may come forward and say, listen, yes, we did commission it, but it doesn't seem to fit anymore. And so the entire trail of having promised you that story in a particular publication may not work out. So there are these problems as well on our side. So I think there's a certain level of understanding that needs to come, that not always will we be able to tell you the publication. And
Right.
these are why.
No, completely understandable. It's just that, I think PR guys also need to keep an open mind to be able to figure out that it might
Right.
happen, it might not happen. Yeah.
Right.
But I think
That's
open communication on that front is also something that is appreciated on both ends.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I usually get in touch with people only once a story is commissioned because I just find it clear that I know this person, my story has been commissioned, the editor, so then I can tell the PR person that XYZ publication has that happens there is most people don't realize that we don't have a say as to when our story is going to come out. So I will constantly get emails from people saying, has the story been published? Has the story been published? I can't even give you an answer when it is published because our editors don't give us an answer as to when a story is going to get published. So, and this I do for most people. I usually send a link back to them saying, okay, this is the story published, check it out. But yeah, it's a little frustrating when you keep getting mails every week saying what happened to this story. Even I'm waiting for it because I want the story to be published so I can get paid. But it's not in hands. Once I write it and send it to an editor, it's an editor's call. And like Ruth said, a lot of times the stories can get dropped completely. Then it's your loss because you're not getting paid for it. Then you have to go back to the PR people and say, I'm sorry, but the story didn't work out. And maybe I can try pitching it somewhere else, but I don't know. So as a freelancer, that becomes difficult because if you're in an organization, then you can always, for instance, say that, my editor didn't like the story. And if you want, you can get in touch with my editor. But I'm not going to put you in touch with my freelance editor so that you can harass them. So,
Okay. So, Joanna, we have another long question for you. This is on your blog on Medium. Love your publication on Medium, but first, food. I think this is from a budding writer. How do I get started on Medium since the partner program is not valid in India? Also read a while back that earnings from Medium are almost nil. So how is it sustainable to make a living with this, with a publication that is hosted on Medium?
it's not sustainable. I didn't start the publication to make any money out of it. I would love to, but we just did it because it's a different version of a blog for us. You're right. The Medium partner program doesn't work in India because Medium pays via Stripe, and Stripe doesn't support Indian banks. And I have written to them back and forth for the past 2 years to ask them about this specifically. They don't know when it's going to happen. Apparently, the Indian government is putting up a lot of roadblocks for them. You can't. I mean, unless you start a blog and start monetizing your blog, Medium is not going to give you any money unless you have a non-Indian bank. So if you have a US bank or anything like that, it would help you. But if you don't, you're not going to earn anything out of it. This is just to get people to read your book. I think it's a good, for me and for my friend Krika, it's a good exercise in the sense that a lot of people are reading our work and a lot of non-Indian people are reading our work. So if an editor has read our work and liked our story, she could get in touch with us, And Medium has its own publication, so you can possibly write for them and get paid there.
Yeah, Medium has taken on, and has been doing very well for the last couple of years. I've been hearing about it from different sources, lovely articles, very unique articles that are there. But I've not heard anybody, honestly, I've not heard anyone say that they've made money out of it.
Not in India. It's difficult in India because, like I said, they don't support Indian banks. But people abroad are making money out of it.
Yeah,
And
I'm talking specifically of India.
yeah, there are a few people I know who may have when Medium was when Stripe was testing out payments in Indian banks, they had maybe opened it out for a bit. So those people must have just been lucky and they are managing to earn something, but that's a very, very, very small percentage of people. Most people
Right.
I know who have Medium publication are not earning anything.
Correct. No, I completely agree. That's a view that has been reinforced by a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, so another interesting one. What are your most and least favorite parts of this work or this lifestyle choice as an independent journalist?
I think the
Okay.
favorite part would be the fact that you get to work on so many different stories, especially if you're doing features and you don't stick to a
Yeah.
particular niche. So there's constantly something new and interesting to work on. So that would be the most favorite part. And I think least favorite part would be the waiting game. When is my payment coming? When is my story getting published? I think that would be the least favorite part of it.
More for the payment part of it. Like
Yeah.
chasing
Waiting
Excel.
for the approval as well. Half the time you're only waiting for
Yes.
approval. So
Yeah.
that's another his favorite bit.
True. Joanna, what about you?
I completely agree with what you said. The fact that I can write for so many different publications and so many different kind of stories is really fun. I'm okay with the waiting game for approval on pitches because I'm one of those people who pitches a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm okay if that happens because then I'm usually working on a couple of other stories. The
Right.
waiting game for payments is the problem because I have a fixed income that I want to earn in mind. I mean, for each month in mind. And if I don't get a payment by a certain day, then it's just really annoying to have to keep emailing your editor and saying, okay, what is happening? Getting in touch with the finance department, asking what is happening, and then hearing excuses like, oh, the pandemic has hit, so it has affected our finances, blah blah blah, all of that. And you want to be understanding, but it's been 3 months, so
Yeah.
you need to get your act into place. I was recently paid for a magazine story I did in Jan, and after
Right.
getting my amount was half. They paid me half, and apparently the other half was cut for TDS. And I was gobsmacked. Like, I know how much money gets cut in TDS. This is literally half of what you're supposed to owe me. I haven't received a response for them. I'm still waiting. Next week, I'm going to go back and send them another set of emails. So that is the annoying part.
I think
can
the
completely.
payment part I've sort of been slightly uh I've been slightly better off in the sense that the publications that I've been writing for, they've been very forthcoming and clear, especially, March, April onwards, what their payment cycle is going to be. It is going to be delayed, but they've also specified the time, if it was
Right.
1 month, then now it's going to become 2 months. And they've stuck
Correct.
to it. They have been making those payments then according to those cycles. So I know when it's expected and I am getting it. There's just one which is yet to pay me for a December article. I've given up my hopes. So that's the only one issue. But otherwise, it's been sorted on that front.
Good thing. So, Dipali, the next question is also for you. What is your favorite beat, and how did you go about creating a safety net for yourself by, writing for different categories?
So my favorite beat has to be theater. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I've been writing
Really?
on theater. I think in my head I wanted to be a theater actor, but I couldn't be one. So this is my way of staying connected with it. But yeah, theaters. I've been covering it for more than 10 years now. I think I started writing on it when I was with Bombay Times, and yeah, that has to be. And like I said, I've always been interested in writing about different fields. Some have been thrust on me. I have been reluctant to take them on, but once I've done it, I've I've realized that I enjoy it, and then I've kept adding those beats. So if
Right.
I added food, I added music, I added interiors, books, films was always there. So yeah, that's the way I've gone about it.
Nice. So there's an issue that one of our viewers has picked up. So while we understand there's a lot of chaos happening in the media industry as well, there are a lot of journalists who are also taking on PR projects at this point of time. Um, Question being, don't you think this affects the objectivity of a journalist? They continue to write for a particular publication. At the same time, they're also looking at PR projects. I mean, me as a PR professional, it's difficult for us also to sail in two boats at the same time. What's your view on this?
I think it depends on each person. Honestly, it's not something I would do. But if the person has managed to keep the PR part of their life and the journalism part of their life separate, for
Right.
instance, if you're doing PR for a particular company, you can't be writing stories about that company.
Correct.
Uh, that sort of thing. Again, it's an individual thing. Honestly, I wouldn't do it because anyway, doing journalism takes up enough of my time. I don't think I have time for PR.
I completely understand. What about you, Ruth? What's your view at this?
I kind of agree with Joanna. I mean, it's a lot to balance when you're a journalist and when you're a PR person. But if you can keep the two separate, that would be an ideal situation. I don't know how far that is really achievable. If you're doing PR for a food client and you start writing a food story and just happen to include them, that can look really bad
Yeah.
on you as well, and your objectivity does take a beating. So
Hmm.
it's not the ideal situation, but I also understand these are tough times and everyone needs to maybe diversify in some way. This could be a starting point for them to make a complete shift. And it's also something that's been happening across industries. If you see, it's a tendency to put your foot in two related industries. So I guess
Correct.
it's entirely how you balance it.
So, how do you see the media industry panning out for the second half of the year? I mean, the first half has had its fair share of, ups and downs. It's almost like a Bollywood movie out there. Yeah, every day there is a new twist or turn. I would rather say it's more of an Ekta Kapoor serial happening out there, with twists and turns happening every week and every month, for that matter. For the next, 6 months, how do you see the media industry coping up?
I hate to sound pessimistic, but I think it's going to get worse because we are nowhere close to this pandemic ending. Our economy has taken a major beating. If the government doesn't give handouts to media organizations, which I highly doubt they will, it's going to get worse. And the sad part is the really good publications, the ones who are doing independent journalism and objective journalism, are shutting down because they don't have funds.
Right.
And that you hear across. I mean, your Times of India is going to survive because those guys are sitting on a lot of money. But it's the small players that are going to shut down. So I think it's going to get worse. A lot of journalists are going to lose their job. I have a lot of friends who have lost their jobs, and these are fairly privileged people, but they also don't have any way of earning an income right now because they are in a city like Mumbai, and Mumbai rents are what bleed us dry every month. And if you don't have income, how are you supposed to pay your rent? So I think it's going to get worse unless there's a major upheaval that happens, which I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen unless you have Reliance going and buying out all your remaining media companies.
That's not
So
going to happen.
listen,
So, a lot
it's
of
happening across fields, so yeah.
So a lot of our viewers are reminiscing about supplements and features because they miss those and they're hoping that it comes back after the pandemic or during this I mean, maybe anytime soon. There is one specific question, since all of you have written for national and international publications, do you see, long format feature stories in India like the ones that come out in New York Times and Guardian? I know Mint does a lot of them. Mint Lounge does a lot of them. Do you see that format catching on in India?
That format is already here.
Yeah, yeah.
Caravan, you have Ken Web, you have Juggernaut. I mean, a lot of them are behind subscription paywalls and all of that. But long form is available
Long
in
form
India.
has been there a
Mm.
long time. Yeah, it's
It's just
been.
that nobody's reading it.
And it
Yeah,
will
yeah.
continue, I think.
It will
Yeah,
continue. Everyone wants to read a good, well thought out
exactly.
story.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah, that's not going to. I don't see that. I mean, it's already there. So,
I completely agree. Yeah, it's already there. I think there are specific publications who are doing a really good job about it. Um, yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Best PR pitches that you've received till date.
I think Ruth can answer that one.
Why?
Really question.
No, thankfully, we did this on the test call, so I actually went back to my email and pulled out a couple that I really liked. I think standard anything that comes out of Script PR in Bangalore from that team, I have really enjoyed all of their pitches. Very spot on, and I like how they think out of the box for their clients. One example I can give you is how they had a client who does Botox injections, but the approach was not from the beauty aspect, but from the aspect of pain management, and it filled into a completely different sector. There's another client that they had, which was on HR statistics and stuff. And the story that they pitched to me was on how women travelers, business travelers, what are the problems they face. So the statistics kind of weaved itself into the story as a base and then moved out from there. I like all the pitches that come out of the other circle in Mumbai. Their pitches are very strong, whatever they have. And they always come back and ask me, okay, if this didn't work with a particular publication, or can you tell us where it went wrong and what can we do to make it more acceptable? So I think they are a team that always opens up. So pitches from them, really great. Viva Consulting also in Mumbai. Mohita Bahadur and her team have done some fantastic pitches. I did a story on Bhuj and Shujan in Bhuj and how they have, they are a team that saves. Basically, they're trying to revive embroidery styles which are indigenous to the tribal region there. And so that story came out in Al Jazeera, and only if it's pitched correctly will you be able to see the story for what it is. So they are another fantastic team. So I have a lot of decent pitches when I went back, and these are some of them. These teams are people I'll read anytime when they send it across.
Brilliant. It's nice to hear so many familiar and good names out there.
Yeah.
Dipali, best pitch.
So unlike Ruth, I don't really have a best pitch. I really can't, recall something like that. Of course, there have been some good ones over the years, but I would just want to add to this saying that what really constitutes a good pitch. For the PRs, no lengthy paragraphs, no extra adjectives to describe their clients. It's more of show than tell, for me.
Right.
If you really, in a few, sentences, you can really let me know who the client is, what the information you're giving me, what the story pitch is, clearly without any extra, shosha around it. I'll be interested in it. But and especially not on WhatsApp. I will not read it. It just annoys me. So send me a good pitch, call me on the phone, tell me about it, or send it over mail. We can have a discussion about it. But those are some of the things that are important for us to then take it further.
Understand. Joanna, best pitch.
Okay, I don't have a best pitch. I mean, I did go back to my inbox and search, but I wouldn't quantify any of them as best pitches. I will repeat what Dipali says. I have guidelines for good pitches, and the companies, in the sense, Details in Bombay does a really good job.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they will send you a very concise pitch. It can get a little rambling at times, but there's a lot of information there. There will be a good photograph to basically highlight what they're saying. And the best part about it is I don't get a message after saying we pitched you this. Can you please check your email and get back? So the thing is, most people need to understand is as writers, we are always in our email. I mean, most of the time when we are working. So we have read your emails, and if we don't think a pitch works, because we get so many pitches in a day, it's difficult for us to reply back and say, hey, this is not happening right now. And sometimes I just put the pitch in my inbox, because if I'm doing a story maybe 3 months down the line, I can always go back and look for it. So I will not respond to you immediately, but I have read your pitches. So you don't have to call me after that and say, please check your mail, or message me after that and say, please check your mail, because chances are I already have. Continuing what Dipali said about a good pitch, and this is something I tell people when they ask me for advice when pitching stories to media houses, like a journalist pitching stories to media houses. It's kind of the same thing. One, get the name of the person correct. like spelling, very important.
Gender also.
Gender is also good.
I
Yeah,
have
that
been
is.
called Mr. Ruth more times than I care. So,
You don't even need to address gender, right? Just say hi,
yeah.
XY person. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I said, quick Google search to find out if they're still working for a particular publication.
Right.
Um, be as precise as you can in the mail, and do not send bulk mails, or at least BCC if nothing else, because I don't
Yeah.
want to receive a mail that has been sent to 250 people, because then one person in that thread will reply saying, please don't send me mass emails. Yeah, I understand it's because you're sending out a lot of mails in a day, but just do BCC, right? So that I don't know if there are 250 other people on this thread. It doesn't matter to me. And don't call. Please don't call 2 minutes after the mail has landed in my inbox saying, please check your.
Obviously.
No, I still get those calls. That's
Yeah,
why.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So tell me something, for a lot of PR professionals, follow-up is a very crucial part of their jobs. Because there is a chain of command, they're answerable to, five other
Yeah.
people in the organization. And it makes their life very difficult at some point when a lot of journalists say don't follow up. So what would be your preferred? We completely understand that, let's say if a story is not interesting, if you reply back to that mail saying not interested, perfectly fine, right? But when there is no response, that's when there is still a so-called a sign of a little bit of hope out there, right? That maybe she's not seen my mail, maybe she's not read my mail. I know a lot of PR professionals in the industry. Everybody has had their fair share of arguments with one particular journalist who said, "Don't call me," right after you've sent me an email. Perfectly, I mean, it happens, right? So how would you, what would be your advice to a PR professional, to be able to figure out whether you're interested in the story or not interested in the story? How does one figure that out?
There's
Because,
no.
like I
I
said,
would.
this can't,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
No, Ruth,
So I
go.
would say, give the mail at least a day or so. I don't mind if someone calls me up a day after they have sent the mail and said, listen, we have sent you this mail. Have you had a chance to look at it? Do let us know. I'm fine with that. But like Joanna said, if I have got mails within seconds, the WhatsApp within seconds, I have a phone call, and then the person reads out the entire pitch on the phone. And that really doesn't make sense. So I'm someone who responds. At least I try to respond to every mail that comes in, and to tell them whether it works or it doesn't work. Would I be interested? No, it doesn't fit. I try to do that as far as possible. Sometimes, maybe not be too, you know, too over enthusiastic with your follow up, because even we have a lot of things going on and we understand how it is. So maybe
Hmm.
not too much of the over enthusiasm. And I guess more journalists need to tell PR people that, okay, this doesn't work, and, just leave it at that so that they can move forward with that pitch. And
Correct,
if I
correct.
can just add to what makes a good pitch, at least for me, especially when it comes to features, if the PR person can also tell me, like when you're doing a feature, you normally need 3 to 5 people who are doing something similar to make it a well rounded story. So if you can add in and tell me, there are others like this, these are the names that are doing it as well, it's up to me to go and
Hmm.
find them. I'm not asking you for the contacts, but at least then I know there is a potential there, and this is not a one off. Just a one-off person who's trying to do this, unless they're doing something really, really unique.
Understandable. Okay, last question. Your advice for the graduating class of 2020 in PR and journalism?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, that's
I
a lot
think
of
the
advice.
one thing that I would say for both, journalists and PRs is work in an organization first. Don't
Yes,
don't
yes.
go independent right from the beginning, because it's always nice to to get your guidance in order. You might have had a degree, you've got a degree in journalism and PR and all that, but it can never really prepare you for when you're really sitting there in an office getting calls, writing stories, getting them published in papers and all that. That's a different setup. So I would
Right.
say work, in an office setup with a team, uh, you know, with a senior, who can guide you on how to go about things. And then, if you feel confident after some time, after a few years, if you think that you will be better off doing stuff on your own, then go for it. But my foremost advice would be to work in an office space first.
That's
That's
good,
really
right?
good advice. And for PR professionals who are graduating this year, because I think it's going to be a really tough world for them.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I think nobody should shy away from doing hard work. There are a lot of shortcuts in both the fields that can be taken, but you should try and avoid that and be prepared for the fact that there is a lot of hard work to get, right to the top. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of youngsters in the PR field and in the journalism field, and they often tend to have the glamour part of it very set for them. They think that that's all there is to it, but all of that is there, yes, but it comes with a lot of hard work behind it as well. So you have to be prepared for it and never shy away from that as well. And yes, work in an organization, just like Deepali said, to get a feel and then consider going independent.
Thank you for saying that, Ruth. I mean, that's really essential for PR professionals as well, because a lot of times they only see the glamour part of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have something to add. You need to be very prepared for setbacks. You need to be
Yes.
prepared for people saying no to you, and that is going to happen a lot. It happens a lot to me now, and I've been a freelancer for 3 years.
Right.
Especially for someone getting out, the tendency of feeling really bad and demoralized if someone says no, or if a journalist doesn't reply to a pitch, all that. You need to take it in a stride and move on, because otherwise you're not going to be able to survive. And it's going to get much harder now because of the situation we are in. It's the same advice for journalists. If you are unfortunately in the situation where you are a freelancer right now, you have to be prepared for getting a no, or having editors not respond to you at all, because
At
that's
all.
what
Yeah.
they do. Yeah,
Right.
and you can't feel really bad that, oh my god, nobody likes my pitch, oh my god, nobody's read it, oh my god, I'm such a terrible writer. You can't. If you
Right.
wallow in that sort of self pity for too long, you're not going to be able to pull yourself out of it. It may sound
Completely.
a bit harsh, but you have to be prepared for a no.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
and it,
emotional and mental resilience is a must.
yeah, and it works
Absolutely.
for
Definitely.
and PR people also. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So on that note, we end our discussion for today. Any parting shots that you would like to add?
Maybe the one thing that I might add to this, since we are talking so much about journalists and PRs working together in tandem and working better and helping out each other, I would just, my one little piece of advice for journalists would be to uh, try and put yourself more in the PR shoes and understand, like you mentioned about, because they are also worried about follow-ups. So, and on that aspect, I agree with Ruth that, just like I wait to hear from an editor, and I'll maybe after 2 days, I'll send in a reminder saying that, have you had a chance to look at my mail? Do you think it works? I know that the PRs are also waiting. So we can be a little more patient with them and maybe a little more responsive. And for PRs, I would say don't always look at the publication that the independent journalist is connected with. Look at them as individuals as well. So today, if I'm not working with a big publication, but I'm pitching to you for, say, a smaller publication, have the decency, have the courtesy, have that respect, respond to me, just say yes, no, pick up the phone, respect me as an individual rather than just say, ki, okay, she's pitching for a chota mota place. So don't
Right.
don't do that. So I think that's maybe one way that the two of us can really work together in tandem.
No, Dipali, thank you. That needed to be
Parting
said.
shot.
That needed to be said.
Yeah.
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 So,
So great.
yeah.
Joanna, you had something to add.
Yeah, I wanted to basically add to what Dipali said, and this is happening a lot nowadays. So most publications have gone digital. So a lot of the stories that we are publishing are only going online, because print doesn't exist for a
Yeah.
lot of places.
Correct.
But you still have people who will write to you and say, "Oh, could you put this in the print publication?" So, you need to understand that digital is the big thing right now. So even if it goes into a small website somewhere, it's still a story that we have worked hard on,
Yeah.
and which is why we are approaching you. So don't really dismiss it. And
Right.
advice for both journalists and PR people: spell check is your best friend. In your email,
Yes.
spell check is your best friend. Trust me. The name of the person and emails have a Gmail has a spell check. So just make sure that no mistakes there. You can't afford to make mistakes because I don't know about others, but that puts me off. Because there are times when I get mails when people have misspelled their client's name. And that for me is very difficult because when I put it in the story, I go by that name. Um,
Hmm.
so you can't misspell your client's name. Like, okay, fine, misspell my name. Don't misspell your client's name. You're working with those guys. So yeah, please
Right.
just a quick spell check. It takes barely a minute, not even a minute.
Then I think that is valid for, in general in the professional world. I know there are so many times I have been referred to as Mr. Tarun, or there has been a surprise on the other end saying, "Oh, you're a girl." Oh, yeah, well, yeah. And this is not just in PR or media. I think even banks that I bank with are surprised that I'm a girl. So,
Yeah,
I think it holds true for the entire professional world. Yeah, just a
right.
quick Google search will help you at least figure out a little bit of details about the person that you're about to speak to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I
much
agree.
information on Google right now. I mean, it's scary, but there is so much information on Google right now. Yeah.
We all volunteer for that information, so we shouldn't be scared to use it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, yeah, that's it.
You know?
If I could just add to what Dipali and Joanna are saying, I think also what needs to be done right now, I'm talking for the PRs specifically. I think clients need to understand how PR works exactly and what media does as well, because many times it is looked at more as a marketing thing than really a story. So clients don't seem to understand that the feature cannot be entirely on them, or certain plugs cannot go in, and that's the way stories are pitched to us. So I think there needs to be a certain understanding between PR and their clients as well on how media works. That needs to be done. And like both Joanna and Dipali have said, I think journalists also need to be a little more open about the kind of pressures that the PR people are under and need to put ourselves in their shoes as well. And one last thing would be for PR people to maybe really consider the kind of stories that you are pitching to us. I mean, if I can give you just one example of one I recently I got a pitch from a PR person representing a really well-known restaurant delivery platform for a campaign that they are running, which is going to encourage people to order from restaurants, which is basically the premise of that site. So I don't really understand what the story was in that. So if it's just the question of promoting a campaign, that does not happen in media. You can't run a story on a campaign. And that I think needs to be understood at some level, what stories work and what doesn't work.
Also be
Understandable.
also be a little sensitive to situations that are happening because a lot of people respond instantly. So something is trending in the world. It can be something horrible like the migrant crisis, but you will get pitches about it, which
Yeah, yes.
bad. Like, just take a step back. We don't want to write about your clients in this situation.
Hmm.
So just a little sensitive. That's it. Those are the mails that will not even get a response from. Those are
I have to add to that. Somebody sent me a pitch for a client saying, so and so musician has paid for the PM Cares charity he's donated for the
Oh, I
fund.
got a
Can
lot
there
of
be a
those.
story?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm sorry that just cannot happen.
yeah,
Like it puts me off your client forever. Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah, but CSR initiatives are so, I know for a majority of the PR industry, that's something we all advise our clients not to use that as a PR story as such. Maybe you can
Yes.
look at an impact story after you've created an impact. Let's say if you adopted a village and you've done something really fabulous, that maybe makes a great story. But on a general note, I think a lot of PR professionals have stopped using CSR initiatives or even donations. Neki kar kuएं mein dal is something that they, kind of push out there. I'm very
Yeah.
surprised at this email in, today in this day and age.
I believe me, I was surprised too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I know I've got a
those
lot
things
of
will
those
not
mails
work.
as well. So yeah, it's really surprising, but it's there unfortunately. So maybe that needs to change as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So great advice. Thank you so much for taking out the time today to speak to all of us. Really appreciate all the insights and wonderful examples that you've shared, and all the names that you've taken of PR professionals who've done great pitches. I think you've made their day today. So, so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. This was really wonderful. And
This was
I think we could have gone on for another few minutes.
Yeah.
Seeing the number of questions, but yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye.
So guys, that was our panel on innovation within media. So why, as you heard, a lot of them speak about different kinds of pictures and different kind of creativity that PR professionals are using in their media pictures. Take a hint from there, take the learnings from here, and make sure that the media out there has some wonderful pictures and wonderful things to talk about for the PR industry as well. So see you next Saturday for the next live.